This is Internet Marketing.
Hello and welcome to the Internet Marketing Podcast, formerly known as the Site Visibility Podcast, produced by the team behind brightonSEO. I'm Kelvin Newman, and in today's episode I'm joined by Andi Jarvis and Katie Thompson, and we're going to be discussing how to be more creative in your marketing. So I'm joined by two really interesting guests. So when we're choosing and speaking to people to be on the podcast, we're obviously reaching out to people we know and people that have got interesting stuff to say. So when thinking about who we could potentially get to come on and talk about creativity today, I was really excited to invite two people who we've had speak at brightonSEO previously, and I'm big fans of the work and I've enjoyed the talk. So I'm really glad to welcome Katie and Andi, but I'll go to Andi first. Andi, can you tell us a bit about how you got started in digital marketing and marketing more generally?
I got started in marketing by being digital marketing by being really old and being in marketing and then evolving into digital. I sort of came out of uni many moons ago, 2001. Just don't tell anyone because they'll be able to work out really just how old I am. And I got into marketing within a couple of years. I had a bit of a background from uni there, and direct mail was the thing that we did a lot of at the time, and radio ads, bit of TV. And then we sort of saw the opportunity for moving into more email marketing at first, and then into social media, and then into SEO as well. So it was kind of a natural progression of learning different tactics and skills, and sort of since taken that holistic approach into a more strategic view of marketing, which is what I tend to do now.
And that's obviously an interesting one, isn't it? That kind of like responding to things, which I think is often marketers do well, right? Isn't it? Whereas they're kind of going, I did a thing that was interesting, I found it compelling, our clients, our projects were wanting to do more of that, and that's that route through. That's always an interesting route into it. How about yourself, Katie? How did you come to this world that we find ourselves in professionally?
Well, it's funny because thinking back to about 2012, which is when I graduated, I was always like, I hate marketing, absolutely. I was really snobbish about it because my background was always sort of in writing. From writing stories when I was 8 years old I told my mum I wanted to be a novelist, and she was like, oh, it's like being an actress, Katie, you'll never get any work. So she said, be a journalist. So I trained in journalism, started working in magazines, print magazines. I was like, no, absolutely not going into that. But then I think just naturally as the world sort of transitioned more into digital, content marketing kind of came onto my radar. I sort of just shut up my inner snob and kind of moved into agencies, and then realised actually I could pull sort of the writing skills and build on marketing skills as well. So I did that. I did a qualification with the NCTJ, National Council for the Training of Journalists, and then later on when I went freelance, also did a degree with the CIM. So now I've fully embraced the marketing, but with the creative writing sort of slant.
Sorry, Kevin, I was going to say, it's interesting how bad marketers are at marketing. Because your number of people you speak to who say like, oh, I didn't want to get into marketing because it just looked hateful. Like, but then they get into it and they're like, this is really cool. I love this. But it seems to be like we're up there with estate agents and politicians, aren't we? People who are just hated by everyone.
Everyone's got an opinion on it. It's like no one's got an opinion on like heart surgeons. They can just go about their day. But it's like, marketers,
most people. Heart surgeons are the worst people in the world. Honestly, they're
really?
Absolute pits. Yeah, well, yeah, the worst ever. Worst people you'll ever meet.
But it is that journey is a fairly common one, isn't it? Whereas like you start in an area and kind of realise how appropriate those skills or those interests can be into marketing. I mean, I had, interestingly, a similar kind of route to Katie. So I was had intentions to be a journalist, went and joined a magazine company. No one wanted to be involved in writing for the website. I volunteered to write for the website when I was working there as an admin person, and discovered blogging, discovered SEO, and that was kind of my route into digital marketing. It's interesting, and I think those kind of different routes that people have got and skills that they've had, I think shape the way that they approach projects whatever role they end up doing, really. And you kind of have these mindset ones, and that brings me to kind of my first question today in terms of, I know you work in different kind of projects. We were talking before we came online on some of the things that you were working on currently. But Katie, I'd love to get a sense of, when you're very first starting a project, what are some of the things, some of the questions you ask, some of the bits of information you need to have in order to have a good creative campaign?
So first of all, I guess the kind of background into the company, how long have you been going? Because it's a very different journey if someone's been around for 50 years compared to if they're a startup who started during the pandemic, for example. looking at obviously what they want to achieve, who are they trying to reach out to, and then kind of what existing marketing have they done before, and if they've done nothing at all, are they coming to me for ideas, or are they coming to me because they've got ideas and they just need someone to execute them? So just, I mean, in marketing terms, I guess we'd call it like the SOSTAC method, kind of like reviewing where we're at and where we want to be. But I try and be quite like informal with it. Like some people, they have like a form for people to fill out and stuff, but I'd rather just have a bit more of an organic chat, just sit down and kind of get to feel them as a person, get a feel for them as a person.
I don't know that you're making it any better, Katie, to be honest with you, but that's
just get my spade and just keep digging. Yeah, because I think it's really important to actually, yes, there's a brand and they might be behind a huge company, but I think it's really important to get that relationship first, because let's say they're an account manager, even long term, let's say if they move on and go somewhere else, then they know you as well. So as much as it's important for me to learn about the company, I like to learn about the people as well. So I think that really sort of informs the strategic direction, as it were.
I mean, can I hard agree on that? I have worked in places and been on the receiving end of this. Here's a form, please fill it in and tell us tell us all about your company. And it's one of those hit yourself in the head moments with a brick for marketers. It's like any chance you get to get in front of a customer and sit and talk to them, but it's quicker, it's more efficient this way. Stop. Go and spend 2 hours a day, 3 days sat with your customer, asking them these questions that you need to get that information. Because to put it on a form, it's usually filled in by the person with the most time or the lowest paid person who's doing it as quick as they can because they can't be bothered with it. That's all you get. You get bad information in, so you get bad information out. That's it. So, yeah, I think it's a terrible way to approach it when it's like, fill this form in. Awful.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of an argument sometimes to have a kind of a process isn't terrible, is it? In terms of like, so you as a person who's working on a project, whether you're in-house or agency side, but yeah, that kind of, you want to be hiding that process, right? So it's kind of, it's there, so you're ensuring that you're ticking all those boxes, but not necessarily.
I mean, I'm the world's most boring marketer. I promise you. All I sell is process, right? When people say, what do you sell? I sell a process to get you to a point. That's it. It's all process. There's process diagrams in there. There's charts and stuff like that. But it's a very people-driven process. I don't smoke. I've never smoked. But when I'm doing those onboarding sessions with clients, when I see people going out to the smoking shelter during a break, I follow them, because the information you get from them stood outside shivering for 10 minutes is worth way more than what they tell you in the boardroom with everybody else, right? It is gold dust. And you don't get that by sending someone an email saying, fill in these 73 questions and send it back to us by the close of play, and then sending them snotty emails because they haven't done it. So, yeah, for me, I've got this 7-step process. I'll not bore you with it all, but the 2 foundation stones of it for me are company and customer at the bottom. So what do you do as a company and who do you do it for? Because most of everything else we do in marketing is just about trying to connect those 2 things. But there's a little bit more to it than that. But if you do nothing more than understand what the company does, what drives it, what its ethos and values are, and who it is they're trying to sell to, and let's be honest, most companies don't really know both of those things. But if you can work those 2 things out, everything else is just trying to connect those 2 dots. That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, have you had much experience, either of you, in terms of having those types of onboarding processes or kind of client knowledge, or have the different names for it, isn't it, where you're kind of trying to understand who you're working with? And this is obviously equally applicable if you're joining a company as an in-house employee as well. But any advice on how to handle that in kind of an online environment? Because obviously it's these kind of, more and more people are working remote. That's obviously like plenty of benefits for that, for individuals and for organisations. But it can often be a bit harder to have those kind of impromptu or longer form meetings as well. I think sometimes can be tricky as well. Any advice on handling that in an online kind of environment? Is it hard to do? Is it one that you can't replicate? And that's fair enough, right, to some extent, isn't it?
There's always the argument for things like, if you've got any existing resources like brand guidelines, tone of voice guidelines, customer avatars, anything like that you've just got ready to send over. That way, for that kind of cuts down the tedium of really long Zoom calls, things like that. But failing that, just a little Zoom conversation if they haven't got any of that, and a lot of people, smaller brands, don't have anything like that, in which case, as I say, more of an organic conversation just to tease that out of them. Just via Zoom or something like that, or even just like a customer testimonial, just to get an idea, not just of how the brand views the brand, but how the customer views the brand. So
Yeah, and I suppose that's it, isn't it? It's kind of making use of the assets that they've already got, isn't it? I suppose that may come in many different shapes or sizes. They may be very involved in some organisations. They may be very old in many organisations, and that gives you a foundation of what you've got. So maybe that allows you, when you are having those Zoom conversations, to be a little bit more informed in the conversations that you're then having. So obviously one of the things I was keen to cover today was kind of creativity, which is a very broad topic, and I know can mean many different things in different kind of sectors and disciplines within digital marketing. But I was kind of keen to get a sense of how do you, like, you know, they're inevitable when working on many different projects. There's kind of it's work, right? This is kind of a thing that there's a lot of it to do. Often projects are large. Often you've got lots of it to do and not a lot of time. How do you kind of try and bring creativity to the work that you're doing to ensure that it's not kind of too similar to things that you've done before? Or how do you think about creativity in some of your projects? Come to you, Katie, first, if that's all right.
Okay. Andy, are you sure? Because I feel like I spoke over you. There was this great talk at Brighton, maybe 2021. I think it was Max Hoppy. Is that his name, or is that like his nickname?
It was indeed, yes.
Hoppy. I wasn't sure if Hoppy was kind of so he did a talk on I think it was like how Google inspires creativity, and I think he said something like they go out into a field with sheep or something really bizarre, and he had this whole big things like you get your best ideas in the shower, or you get them on the toilet or whatever and stuff like that, and you don't get them when you're sitting in a meeting trying to brainstorm with people or whatever, because that's just the most forced non-creative environment. So for me, I would really encourage doing anything that's absolutely getting you out of that boardroom. I'm all for sort of an exchange of ideas, but sometimes inspiration just strikes at the strangest times. Like earlier on this year, I was just in the middle of a yoga session and I had this whole idea for like a novel, and I started writing it. And so my advice would be like always have kind of a pen and paper or a phone or something next to you, because if that idea just strikes in the middle of the night, just write it down. And sometimes you could just be falling asleep thinking about a client, you know?
I think to some extent it's also about that kind of, taking the moment when it comes, right? I know for me personally, like there'll be days where I'm just not feeling it, right? And it's like for whatever reason. And that could be like not just creativity, just kind of like motivation. And like I'm fortunate that like I've got kind of the environment where it's like if that day is the day where I'm just going to be browsing around on Twitter or checking whatever it is that I'm distracting myself with, YouTube videos about aquariums or whatever it is, I'll lean into that, right? But then when the days come where it's like I've got 101 ideas, it's finding a way of capturing those and getting them kind of into the process so you can then do the execution stuff. Andy, how about yourself? How do you kind of like face up to some of this kind of like day-to-day challenges of being like, turn it on, Andy, you need to be creative today?
Yeah, it's difficult. Forced creativity is really difficult. I did my best, if you're watching the video today, by wearing a trucker cap that doesn't match with the rest of my outfit to prove that I can be creative sometimes. And I think like forced creativity can be really difficult. And like Katie said, and from Max's presentation, sitting in a meeting, come up with ideas, really quite difficult to do. But I think the thing with creativity is, I think sometimes it works the opposite to how some people think. They think creativity is just about having this massive blank space to be able to go away and come up with ideas, and that's it. Now, maybe in the arts world, if you are an artist, that's how it works. I'm not sure. I've never been an artist. But when you're talking about commercial creativity, which is really what we're talking about, to me, it's about understanding what the constraints and constrictions are around what you're trying to do. So it's not about having a blank sheet of paper. For me, it's about understanding the size of the box you have. So I've done a lot in alcohol marketing, for example, over the last decade. And alcohol marketing has a lot of real tight regulations. And in Ireland, the regulations are entirely different to they are in the UK. And if you're working with a brand across Ireland, that's Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, you've got two sets of regulations. So you end up with a really quite small box that you can work with. And then the shape of the box changes because you look at what everybody else does in the industry. That's not to copy them, though. That's to understand what the conventions are. So once you know what the conventions are, which is the shape of the box, and the regulations, which is the size of the box, you've then got a very small space or a big space. And within that, you can be creative. So for me, the meetings are about being able to define what that box looks like. You don't have to draw a box. I'm just talking about metaphorically.
A metaphorical box. Yeah.
Metaphorical box, right? So you're defining what that box is. And then just let people go. My favorite, I live by the sea. My favorite is going out for a walk. I do all my best thinking walking. I don't put earphones in. I don't put podcasts on. I just go and walk. And no phone, nothing. You just have to let your mind think. And it's amazing where it goes. But you know what size the box is? And often you're not even thinking about it. And then on the way back, you'll be like, oh, hang on a minute. And that's the little bit where that subconscious kicks in. That's why you have the ideas in the shower, in the bath, or big flex there, Katie, as well. Yoga session and author as well. I mean,
I mean, it's a work in progress. That's a really good point you made there about having that limitation. Because yes, as much as it's great to have blank canvas, that can be quite overwhelming. I think the pandemic was a really, really good example. They say that like necessity is the mother of invention. So we had Burberry went from fashion to masks or something. Restaurants going online and turning everything to like e-commerce and stuff. So sometimes those restrictions actually kind of inspire innovation and creativity as well. So good point.
No, what you can't do is often kind of quite helpful, isn't it? And it is like, and even so, we've been through the process of kind of launching in the States and all that kind of thing, where for us it was on our list for a very long period of time. And the reason we never really made any progress because it was too big, it was too much of we couldn't really decide where to start. And I think that's not unusual for kind of these projects that people might have, where it's like we should do that thing, and that thing is always 6 to 12 months away, and it sort of continually moves into the future. And some kind of constraint. And for us, it was literally we'd hired someone, we needed to do something, and an amazing Lindsay showed up, who's an amazing person to work with, and it's like, well, we're now paying a salary for that, we need to do a thing quickly, and that gave us a deadline, right? And it's amazing what a deadline can sometimes do to encourage people to move along.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, Katie. I think my invite to speak at the first Brighton SEO in San Diego got lost in the post, but hopefully there'll be one for the second and third iterations of it. But no, I think look, deadlines are essential to this. So I'm not saying you should just let people go off and walk and do whatever. You need a deadline because we are commercially creative. So you've got to do that, but you've got to understand the constrictions around it. And I think the other thing is, momentum is often underrated in these things, and like you've mentioned there about having this big idea, it can be overwhelming. So being able to go, right, what's the next best thing we can do? I think it's used in Frozen 2, that isn't it? What's the next best thing? How do we take that forward and make it and take another step towards it? And sometimes it's not even the big idea that you've come up with. It's saying, well, could we test part of that? Because if we can get that to work and that to work and that to work, we can go to the client and say, we've got these 3 bits that work. Can you greenlight the rest of the budget? Or you can pitch it internally and say, we've looked at these 3 successes we've had. Now can we spend the big money on it? If you just go and say, this is a great idea, but can you greenlight a couple of £100,000 for it? No. So momentum's really important in creativity as well. So getting some wins under your belt and proving you can do what you say you're going to do.
Nice one. And obviously, it's always useful when we do interviews like this because we've got really intelligent people, and obviously all benefiting from their process of how they learn, how they develop their skills, and all that kind of thing. So I always like to close out conversations like this by asking for kind of like a recommendation. I kind of say a resource, but that sounds a bit weird. I mean, like kind of a book that's been good for you, a podcast that's been valuable recently, a newsletter, something like that someone might be able to go and have a bit of a look at, and go to first. Andy's going and clearly getting here, so I'll let him have a second to sit back down. But Katie, any particular recommendations that you can suggest for things that people might be able to go off and take more from?
So, I mean, in terms of strictly a business book, I would say The E-Myth. I was just double checking the author is Michael E. Gerber, not Gruber, Gerber. So he talks about technicians and managers and entrepreneurs. So if you're starting out as a freelancer, you're not just the painter or whatever. You're also the person who builds the business and markets it and stuff like that. But a book that also really changed my life, I read it in COVID. It's called Quiet by Susan Cain, and it's about introverts and extroverts, and it's really helped shape our business because I work for my husband Craig Kelvin, met him for me. He's very much an introvert, I'm very much an extrovert, and I realised this is why I'm such an annoying pain in the arse, because I'm an extrovert and I need that energy and I need to blah, 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 blah. Whereas introverts they're very perceptive, they might be quiet, but they might have the best ideas. And it's about kind of learning the balance and how you can sort of apply both of those traits to work. So a lot of people say, oh, I can't run a business, I'm an introvert, but no, you can. look at all your strengths, read this book, it would change your life.
Ah, that sounds interesting. Yeah, I definitely think that kind of understanding your personality and motivations and how you and others approach things is an incredibly powerful way of developing, right? Isn't it? In terms of the ability to do that and like knowing, I think the big difference for myself now versus 10 years ago is like, yeah, probably leaning into what I am good at and kind of accepting, well, here are the things I'm not very good at. And, you know, actually it's better to be like getting a couple of % better at the stuff that you're already pretty good at rather than trying to get the areas that you're never going to be strong at and making a bit stronger. Andy, you fetched a book, so it sounds like you've got a good answer there on that side of things.
I did. So it's Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. You'll spot, if you're watching the video, there's a picture of Buzz Lightyear on the front. Yeah. Ed Catmull was the guy who led Pixar through the Renaissance and into making hit after hit after hit. And it's a bit more operational and organizational rather than here's how you come up with a good idea. But there was a reason Pixar kept having hit after hit after hit, and it was how they organized and how they generated feedback from people within the organization to make things better, which is often really about creating a safe space where people can feel A, happy to be critiqued, and B, happy to give criticism, constructive criticism. Because you'd be amazed how many times you're looking to make an idea better and you say to people, can you tell us what needs improving in this? And I do, every time I do a new presentation, I'll present it to a small group of people and say, tell me what needs to improve. And no one tells you anything of any use for the first 5 or 10 minutes because they don't want to upset you. And it's like, no, honestly. So you have to set the scene so people can feel confident they can give you that critique, and that the person receiving that doesn't feel under attack. And there's a lot of great stuff in there about how they do it at Pixar. It was written before there was a bit of a scandal. So Ed Catmull ran it, and John Lasseter was the creative director, who I think maybe ended up getting nudged out under a bit of a cloud. So yeah, read it obviously with your eyes open to that, but the elements in there about how they put notes day together and how they foster creativity within the organization, really, really good. And it's also a really brilliant book. Ed Catmull does seem like a nice fellow.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scale of what like organizations like that are having to do as a creative process is kind of, hugely illuminating for what might be a smaller scale project that you're working on, but inevitably there's lessons that you can kind of learn there as well. And I'll chip in my one that kind of like has come to me as we're having these conversations as well. It might feel a little bit left field, but there's a dance act called KLF from the 1980s. And I've watched a few sort of YouTube documentaries. There's 2 or 3 about, I think Trash Theory's one is one that I kind of quite liked, about their process of how they went about creating music in the 80s and 90s. And they wrote a manual about how to create a hit #1 single. And just like generally reading up on them, I think can be a really interesting one, because like it's sampling culture, it's taking ideas and elements of them, repurposing. And it might initially seem, music, what's that got to do with, writing about payday loan company or whatever it is that it might be that you're working on. But it's amazing how some of these ideas can kind of bleed into your work.
There's 2 things about that, Kelvin. Number one, I have the only signed poster by the KLF of them burning £1 million, because I went to the video of them burning £1 million when I was about 17. Yeah. And I asked the guy to sign the poster, and he was like, no, we're not pop stars, we don't sign posters. I was like, I've got a mate at school who said he'll give me £50 for it if I can bring it back signed. And he went, oh, you grifting bastard, and signed it. Where is it? It's actually rolled up because my wife won't let me put it up. But anyway, it's rolled up somewhere in the house. And number 2, it's a perfect point you make, right? There's nothing annoys me more than people in marketing or in any form of business who only read books about that thing. Right? Yeah. When you study and you write a dissertation, the advice is read widely, narrow quickly. That's how you kind of write the opening part of your assignments. And the same goes for marketing. If you only ever read books about marketing, like go out and read sci-fi, read books about music. Go on, people are like, oh, I don't read novels, it doesn't help. Are you bonkers? Like, read novels, right? Read different stuff. Read widely. Read trashy magazines, because all of that filters in to what you bring to work, and that diversity of thought creates better campaigns. So if someone says like, oh, what are you reading that for? It doesn't help because it's a trashy novel. Tell them to get bent. It's ridiculous. It's a great idea to read widely.
Yeah, this is it. This is why I'm always tying about on my phone rather than actually in work, right, Andy? That's my excuse on that. So I'm expanding my horizons. But no, I think that's a really good note to kind of wrap up there and give a good sort of sense of what people might want to do. So in terms of keeping in touch, if people have enjoyed listening to you, want to learn more about you and your work, Katie, how would people kind of track you down online if they want to kind of keep abreast of what you're up to?
LinkedIn, Katie Thompson. All my social profiles are Katie Lingo York. Approach Instagram, Pinterest, because it's making me just pissing about, honestly. But
Nice
yeah.
one. I'll drop links to all of those as well in all of the show notes and all various places that this video ends up, but that's good to know. And yourself, Andy?
LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads. Doing it for the Threads. The death of Twitter has been a hard thing for me to take, but I still have an account. I don't use it, so don't bother trying to find me there. But it's Andy with an I. Just look for Andi Jarvis, spelled with Andy with an I, and you'll find me wherever you are.
Oh, amazing. Well, thanks very much for that. Really enjoyed that session. Hope everyone's taken a huge amount away from that. Will be more episodes coming up soon. And enjoy, keep learning, and have a great time.
Thanks, Calvin.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of the Internet Marketing Podcast, produced by the team behind BrightonSEO, the world's largest specialist digital marketing conference covering SEO, PPC, paid social, web analytics, and content marketing. If you want to find out more about us and the show, you can check out the website, internetmarketingpodcast.org. And if you've not already subscribed to the show, you should hit that subscribe button. And can I ask a favour, if you are subscribed and you're enjoying the show, can you leave us a review wherever you're watching or listening to the show? And if you want to get in touch, become a guest on the show, or just generally feedback about what we're doing, you can always email me. That's kelvin@brightonseo.com. So KELVIN@brightonseo.com. Or, of course, you can contact me on social media. So at LinkedIn or Twitter, my usernames are Kelvin Newman. See you soon.